It's a celebration of America's freedom. Welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. The Mark Scaringi Show is your place for a weekly discussion on making America great again. The important political and legal issues of the day, a celebration of the Constitution, and traditional American values. Mark is a practicing attorney, a former senatorial candidate, a Donald J. Trump-endorsed delegate, and a defender of the Constitution. His goal? To put America first. And now, celebrating America's freedoms, here's attorney Mark Scaringi.
And welcome to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is the place where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America first. Good afternoon. Welcome to my listeners on WHP 580 AM, iHeartRadio, and Harrisburg 100 Facebook Live. Thanks for tuning in. For prior podcasts of the show, for columns, my columns on Penn Live and the Harrisburg Patriot News, or to check out some great merchandise we have, take a look at the MarkScaringiShow.com website. Well, President Trump has created chaos among the national news media, the Republican and Democratic Party leaders, and the president of Mexico, as he announced just days ago a bold new plan to control our southern border and at the same time generate revenues for U.S. taxpayers. Yes, we're talking about Trump's tariffs, these big, beautiful tariffs that the president has announced he's imposing on Mexican imports. The president has invoked his authority under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act and will impose a 5% tariff on all Mexican imports that come into the United States. The tariff will commence June 10th. That's just about 10 days from now. So it's happening right now and will increase by 5% each month as it caps out at about 25%. Now, the president declared the tariffs will remain in effect until Mexico stops illegal immigration from coming into the United States. And the president has declared that it will be his sole and exclusive decision to determine if and when Mexico has done the job the president believes they need to do to stop this massive influx of illegal aliens coming across our southern border into the United States. Now, the president tweeted this new policy, and the White House followed up with a more detailed statement. And the statement is extraordinary, in my view, in its plain-spoken and frank description of the problem that the president has identified and the remedy he has proposed for its solution. So I encourage my listeners to Google the actual White House statement, and it's similar to a lot of what we hear coming out of the White House and out of the Twitter feed of this president. It lacks the typical political speak, the way politicians speak, and they try to explain themselves in ways that do not really actually say anything real and substantive. They have a career of kind of kicking the can down the road and not actually doing what's necessary and right to identify the problem, let alone fix the problem. But that's not the way President Trump rolls. He knows exactly what is harming America. He's been talking about it for 30 years now. I remember watching video clips of him on the Oprah Winfrey Show in the 80s or early 90s talking about, well, I think it was the 80s, talking about how America is getting ripped off from these alleged trading partners. Back then, the nemesis was Japan, Japan Inc., as it used to be referred to. So the president has spent decades on this issue of trade and how America's trade policies have done so much harm to American manufacturing, American wealth production, Americans, working class Americans, blue collar Americans, income production. They've all been devastated by these free trade deals that liberal Democrats and Republicans have entered into, starting with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, back in 1994. That was one of the biggest, and that's in the crosshairs of this president. Well, in the White House statement that was released in response or directly after the president tweeted this bold new policy plan, here are just the opening lines of the statement from the White House. I'll read those lines, and then I want to hear from my listeners what you think about the president's big, bold, new Mexican tariffs. You can call in at 717-540-0580. That's 717-540-0580, and tell me whether you think the president has made the right decision to impose across-the-board tariffs on the importation of every product from Mexico. And here's the White House statement. It starts, as everyone knows, the United States of America has been invaded by hundreds of thousands of people coming through Mexico and entering our country illegally. The sustained influx of illegal aliens has profound consequences on every aspect of our national life, overwhelming our schools, overcrowding our hospitals, draining our welfare system, and causing untold amounts of crime. Gang members, smugglers, human traffickers, and illegal drugs and narcotics of all kinds are pouring across the southern border and directly into our communities. Thousands of innocent lives are taken every year as a result of this lawless chaos. It must end now. Now, those are just the opening sentences. Those are the first three sentences of the White House statement. And here we have the White House, the President of the United States, using phrasing such as America has been invaded by hundreds of thousands of people, that this sustained influx of illegal aliens has had profound consequences on every aspect of our national life. And he focuses in on gang members, smugglers, human traffickers, illegal drugs and narcotics pouring across our southern borders, creating a lawless chaos. I mean, these are stark words from the White House and the President of the United States. This is the president is building his case for why he has imposed these tariffs. Now, the White House goes on to say that Mexico has cooperated with what it refers to as this incursion that constitutes a threat to the security and economy of the United States. So here the president is actually putting the emphasis on both security and economy. The White House statement says Mexico could easily halt illegal immigration at the U.S. border and stop them from crossing into Mexico at Mexico's southern border. It explains the massive cost to the United States taxpayer and the terrible and preventable loss of human life due to the Mexican gangs who terrorized the border. The White House statement states, for years, Mexico has not treated us fairly, but we are now asserting our rights as a sovereign nation. The White House statement further explains that if Mexico fails to act, tariffs will remain at the high level, 25%, and companies located in Mexico may start moving back to the United States to make their products and goods. Companies that relocate to the U.S. will not pay the tariffs or be affected in any way. Over the years, Mexico has made massive amounts of money in its dealings with the U.S., and this includes the tremendous number of jobs leaving our country. Now, should Mexico choose not to cooperate on reducing unlawful migration, the sustained imposition of tariffs will produce a massive return of jobs back to American cities and towns. Remember, our great country has been the piggy bank from which everybody wants only to take. The difference is now we are firmly and forcefully standing up to America's interests. Well, there's the hard-hitting statement from the President of the United States through the White House in support of his bold decision to impose across-the-board tariffs on the importation of every Mexican good into the United States of America. I want to hear from my listeners what you think about the president's plan. When we return from this brief commercial break, you're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Now, more of Mark Scaringi on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show. This is your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is the place where we put America first, and our dear President, Donald J. Trump, has in fact very much put America first with his release of his plan to impose across-the-board tariffs on the importation of Mexican goods. Apparently the president is fed up and tired of the excuses by the Mexican government as to why it cannot stop or prevent or reduce this massive influx of illegal immigration across Mexico and into the United States through our southern border. And President Trump has finally thrown down the gauntlets, and he has threatened to impose these tariffs that has the president of Mexico and the entire establishment that governs Mexico and its economy shaking in their boots. And of course, the leaders of the United States Republican and Democratic parties in this case are taking the side of the Mexicans because, of course, our own political leaders are fully engaged in this kind of open borders, free trade, new world order where the U.S. sovereignty suffers as a result of the goals of big business to move capital and labor across borders to find the cheapest means of production. Of course, that has harmed significantly the United States of America, American workers, and U.S. taxpayers. So let's hear what our listeners think about the president's decision to impose these tariffs. You're welcome to call 717-540-0580 and let me know what you think. We'll open up the phone lines, and here's Rick from Lancaster. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show. Do you agree or disagree with the president's decision?
Yes. Hey, Mark, I do agree. I agree 1,000%, and I would hope, I don't know why he's starting with 5%. He should just go straight to 25% and just do it.
Now, tell me why you think this is the right decision for the president to impose these tariffs.
Well, we are really under attack. A lot of these migrants coming in are being funded globally. This is an attack upon our sovereignty. It's a continuation of reducing the wealth, the redistribution of wealth from America into the third world. And, there's people making money on this. The cartels are involved in this. President Trump wants to, for a variety of reasons, but, for the benefit of America, he needs to cut down on the amount of drugs, human trafficking, all the people making money, bringing in illegal people that do not want to come into our country the legal way.
Well, and of course,
the previous immigrants have.
Well, and the president of Mexico essentially admitted in his response to President Trump's plan that Mexico is essentially corrupt. Its number one, its biggest problem is corruption. And you referenced the human traffickers and the drug smugglers and the cartels, and they certainly have a stranglehold on much of Mexico. And, of course, they're bribing and paying off Mexican politicians and officials to allow this human trafficking and drug trafficking to go right through Mexico and into the United States. So I think you've hit the nail on the head. Just yesterday, Border Patrol agents, they apprehended, I think, the largest group of illegal aliens ever. Over 1,000 people illegally crossed the border in El Paso at about 4 a.m. in one large group. Think about that. The president is referring to this as an invasion.
It is an invasion. This is literally an invasion, and it benefits the Democrats, number one. But you don't understand that 80% of the people that come into our country that do ultimately are able to vote. And I guess in California, that just means showing up with a California-issued identification card. That they vote, and more than 80% of them vote for the Democrats because they know they're behind allowing this invasion. Now, you brought up the point that the politicians in Mexico have been paid off by cartels and whatever money is available. Hey, our politicians are being paid off legally through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and who does contribute to both parties. But the Democrats are in lockstep on the open borders, and only some of the Republicans are. And our president can't even get support from his own party on this issue because some of our Republicans, including Mitch McConnell, are taking money from the Chamber of Commerce, which is pro-open borders. So, this is, this is absolutely crazy what we're allowing to go on in this country. Well, and President Trump should be, they should put him up on Mount Rushmore if he can solve the problem.
I agree. He's putting America first and probably the most important way on trade or one of the most important ways, because we've lost so much over the years due to these free trade deals. And you mentioned the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Well, they just put out a statement in which they're stating they're looking for ways to challenge the president's decision to impose these tariffs on Mexican goods. So they're going to be reviewing their legal options, and they'll likely be filing suit, and they'll find some liberal federal district court judge, and will probably be dealing with an injunction and a restraining order imposed by a district court judge on the president's tariff plan.
I'm confident our president will take it even further. In his promise to put America first. Hey, if it takes taking this country all the way up to martial law and putting the military on the border, do it. This is you can't allow these liberal activist judges to run our country. He's been roadblocked before with them. It takes a while to get things to the Supreme Court. Hey, in the meantime, this is a national emergency. Declare martial law, and let's get down to business. We need to solve this country before we lose this country.
Hey, Rick from Lancaster, thanks for calling. Appreciate having the benefit of your views. I'm going to get some other callers. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And Philip from Wiccanisco, you're on the Mark Scaringi Show. Are you in favor of the president's bold tariff policy, or do you oppose it?
I'm absolutely in favor of it. Because what we have here is a real problem. The corporations are having a field day because now they can get cheap labor. Didn't you just also say that, if I remember right?
I did, yes.
Okay. You've got judges that are, just like you said, are in lockstep with the Democratic Party. We have two governments out there. It's like dealing with a newly elected president who's still trying to get into office while we have a banana republic trying to run this country underneath of this guy.
Well, and of course, the mainstream media has gone apoplectic in response to the president's decision to impose these tariffs. And we've heard from leaders of the Republican Party who oppose them as well. Chuck Grassley, the powerful chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, Joni Ernst, United States Senator, they've also come out in opposition to the president's tariff plan.
Yeah, it gets to the point where, the only person worth voting for is Trump himself. That's it.
Well, you make a good point, and sometimes I feel like we Americans who want to have good jobs to be able to provide for our families.
We need to protest.
We want to keep manufacturing because that's where the good jobs are. It's in manufacturing and it's in production. Right. That's what we need to be a healthy and wealthy and strong country. But it's like we're in a pincer between leaders of the Democratic Party and the Republican Party who are both against us on this critical issue. We need to have
some sort of large demonstration. It would take like maybe 2 or 3 million people going down there and say, impose the tariffs. It seems that the only people that demonstrate are the Democrats. What's the matter with the people whose voices are put him in office? Why not they go and demonstrate? Just perform a huge demonstration down there.
Well,
we can't ignore 1 million people.
We Republicans, we're all busy working. We don't have the time to take off work to go demonstrate.
There's always a day you can pick, just one day. It's not going to kill everybody one day. To pull this off.
I hear you. That's what we need to do. Philip from Wiccanisco, thanks for calling. Appreciate that.
No problem.
Very good views, very good thoughts from our callers and our listeners here on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio. And you're welcome to call in and tell me whether you think the president has made the right or wrong decision to impose these tariffs on the importation of all Mexican goods into our country. The United States Chamber of Commerce, business leaders of large businesses, global businesses, of course, oppose the president in this effort. The stock market has declined significantly yesterday and on Thursday in response to the president's announcement. And I just wanted to talk about just one particular company. It's Constellation Brands. It's a Chicago-based beer division, and they have the exclusive right to import into the U.S. Popular Mexican beers, Corona, Modelo, Pacifico, into the U.S. Now, their share price plunged 6% on Friday, and that was, I guess, far in excess of the overall market drop of 1.4%. So its stock price dropped significantly in response to the decision by the president, the announcement by the president to impose these tariffs. And its president and CEO, the president and CEO of the Beer Institute, Jim McGreevey, warned of harm not only to importers, but to U.S. retailers, truck drivers, and farmers along the supply chain if Mexican brewers suffer. So last year, he says, the Beer Institute, U.S. barley farmers exported 209 million worth of barley to Mexico for beer production. And so this is an argument that many in the Chamber of Commerce and on Wall Street and our liberal friends, our libertarian friends who are all pro-free trade, they talk about the fact that Trump's tariff policy is disrupting or will disrupt the supply chain and how damaging that is to the U.S. economy. But in reading this statement by the Beer Institute, I wonder, why is it that U.S. farmers are shipping barley all the way down to Mexico across the southern border for it to be used in Mexican beers that are then shipped back to the U.S. to be consumed here? If you are really concerned about supply chains, if you're a businessman, if you're a manufacturer, you know that you want the shortest supply chains that are economically feasible. Just like if you're a general in war and you're commanding armies, you want the shortest, most economical supply chains. So why is it that we're shipping all this barley down to Mexico to be made into Corona? Do we not have any beer brewers in the United States of America? One of the fastest growing industries in the U.S. is microbreweries, microbrewing. Why can't we brew our own beer here? Why can't U.S. farmers ship that barley? Now, we know they are right here domestically, shorten those supply lines. So if Corona wants to manufacture and brew beer, why doesn't it do it in Texas and ship it to Arkansas and Pennsylvania that way and use American barley? You know, this whole idea that tariffs disrupt the supply chain, that's only because the supply chains are overextended because of NAFTA, because of free trade and taking down barriers and borders. When you put the borders back up, those supply chains will shorten, and that will bring production back to the United States of America where we want it. You're listening to the Mark Scaringi Show. We're talking about the Trump tariffs. I want you to call in and tell me what you think, whether they're right or wrong. When we return from this brief commercial break, you're listening to the Mark Scaringi Show.
Let's get back to the Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to the Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is the place where we talk about the important political and legal issues of the day from the perspective of putting America, not Mexico, first. President Trump has announced his bold decision to impose unilateral, uniform, across-the-board tariffs on the importation of every Mexican product into the United States. The tariff takes effect June 10th. It starts at a 5% rate. It increases by 5% each month until it caps out at 25%. The president will decide whether to reduce or eliminate the tariff based upon Mexican conduct and behavior by the Mexican government in stemming the flow of illegal drugs and illegal immigration into the United States of America. And we had one caller who said, why didn't the president start at 25%? And I must agree. I've been talking about this for a long time, years and years and years. One of the main reasons why I supported then-candidate Donald J. Trump and became his endorsed delegate to the Republican National Convention is because of his America First policy on trade, foreign policy, and immigration. But on trade, in my view, the president should have scrapped NAFTA altogether and should have imposed 25% tariffs across the board on all Mexican goods. And you would have seen Ford and Fiat and Chrysler, all those maquiladora down there in northern Mexico, bring all those factories back to the U.S. and bring all those jobs back and put America working again and provide thousands and thousands of good-paying blue-collar jobs to the American people. That's what the president should have done. He didn't. I'm glad that he has now decided to impose these tariffs on Mexico. I think they should be 25%. He's starting at 5%. Let's hope he actually carries out this plan, and let's hope those tariffs actually take effect. You know, he did the tariffs on Chinese imports. He had a delay for a couple of months, a suspension, but they're in effect, and they're in effect now. Actually, I believe today is when those couple $100 billion in tariffs went on to the importation of Chinese goods. So this president has stuck his ground and kept his word on the issue on these tariff policies. So that's a good indication that on June 10th, we're going to see this 5% tariff go into effect in Mexico. Now, the question is this right or wrong for America, the Trump tariff plan? And we welcome you to call in 717-540-0580 and let me know what you think. We have Skip from Harrisburg. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
How you doing, Mark? Hey, I think we're going about this the wrong way.
Okay.
American people will wind up getting penalized because of the higher cost of things that are coming in. What we should do is go after the three countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, and Nicaragua. We send them in the billions of foreign aid every year. Cut that off. Cut every penny of the money going to those three countries from the taxpayers completely off, 100%.
I agree. I think we should eliminate all foreign aid. I ran for office on that platform. I'm with you. But why do you think that the American consumer will suffer if we have tariffs on automobile parts or tomatoes or avocados or what have you from Mexico?
Well, unless they're going to be subsidized, or if that trade's going to be picked up, that we lose for the higher prices from Mexico. If there's somebody else willing to pick up those parts or whatever it is,
well, sure. I mean,
whatever.
Wouldn't those part companies and suppliers then have an incentive to relocate back to the United States from whence they came?
Well, either that or wherever else we're getting them from. Let's get them from whoever else we're getting them from now.
Or how about let's get them from America?
That's even better.
Where do the automobile industry and the auto parts industry start? In Mexico?
No, absolutely not.
Right, let's bring it home. Bring it home. Skip from Harrisburg, thanks for calling. Appreciate
You're
that.
welcome.
And let's talk to David from Landisburg. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
How you doing, Mark?
I'm doing great. Did the president make the right decision, or is it the wrong decision to impose tariffs on Mexican imports?
He is doing the right decision all the way. He can take it up to 50% as far as I'm concerned. It's time to stop the whole damn thing. I'm sick and tired of it. I'm sick of the Democrats. I'm sick of the mainstream media. Because what they're forgetting here, Mark, is, it might cost us a few more dollars in our goods. And that's okay. I'll pay it. I don't care. Because it's costing us a hell of a lot more to take care of these people when they get into this country. And what we're going to pay in goods is a drop in the bucket compared to what we're paying right now to take care of the illegals coming in. People better open their eyes and wake up, because this is not good what's happening. And Trump is right.
And the president, in his remarks and in the White House statement, did focus in on the massive cost to U.S. taxpayers to provide for these illegal immigrants who come across the border in forms of education and hospitalization.
That's right.
And you can go down the list how expensive it is to U.S. taxpayers, and so many of them are fraudulently filing asylum claims when they have no grounds to assert asylum. I mean, leaving a country that is a third world economy to try to get into the world's largest welfare state, the United States of America, that's not a ground for asylum, is it?
No. And it's time to play hardball with the Mexican government. We've been playing fast and loose with them much too long. Trump's exactly right with what he's doing. I support him 110%. I just hope he ratchets it up as far as he can until he brings them to their knees.
I'm with you, David from Landisburg. Thanks for calling. Appreciate having the benefit of your views. I think you're right on target with that. And David from Landisburg mentioned the Mexican president. Boy, the Mexican president sent a letter to President Trump, which I think is one of the more remarkable letters that I've read. Now, of course, I read the translation of this letter. I don't read Spanish, even though I had 3 years of Spanish in high school. Can't read a lick of it today. But in any event, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, and maybe I have a little bit of the Mexican accent, or perhaps it's the Italian accent. They're very similar, right? Responded to the president's tariff decision by sending a very harshly worded letter to President Trump, in which the Mexican president said this, that Trump's tariff plan is turning the United States overnight from a country of brotherly love for immigrants from around the world to a bolted space, like a space that's like bolted down, where they're stigmatizing, mistreatment, abuse, persecution, and a denial of the right to justice to those who seek, with sacrifice and hard work, to live free from misery. Those are the written words of the Mexican president to the President of the United States, essentially accusing the president and those who support him on this bold tariff plan of stigmatizing, mistreating, abusing, persecuting, and denying the right to justice for all of these hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of illegal aliens. That's the response of the president of Mexico. Is that justified? Is that what the Trump tariff plan is all about? Is it about stigmatizing and mistreating, abusing, and persecuting Mexicans and Hondurans and Nicaraguans who illegally cross our southern border? Is the president of Mexico right? You can call in. Let me know what you think. 717-540-0580. So that's 717-540-0580. You know, to me, the best part of this letter from the Mexican president is that he ends this one sentence with talking about the right to justice of all of these migrants to live free from misery. And so the Mexican president is admitting that it's miserable to live in Mexico. It's miserable to live in Central America. And that's why we Americans should accept these migrants to relieve them of their misery that they live in Mexico and Central America. And my thought is, well, why doesn't the Mexican president try to make Mexico a less miserable place in which to live? And perhaps that would stem the flow of this migration. The Mexican president continues by writing, how does one transform overnight the country of fellowship with immigrants from around the world into a ghetto, a closed-off space that stigmatizes, mistreats, he's used those words twice in his letter, chases, expels, and cancels legal rights to those who are seeking, with effort and hard work, to live free of misery. Well, I guess there are two translations of that part of the letter that I've read. But those are some pretty strong words from the president of Mexico, and he admonishes President Trump. Now, Mexico is a failed narco-terrorist state. It is controlled to a large degree by human traffickers, drug smugglers, these cartels, who have terrorized so many Mexican citizens, so many Mexican politicians. The Mexican border with the U.S. is a lawless land controlled by Mexican gangs. So the Mexican president, now he's going to admonish and lecture the president of the United States. The Mexican president writes to Trump and says, you can't solve social problems with taxes or coercive measures. So that's it. So we in America, we can't solve social. The president of Mexico is going to lecture us on how to solve social problems. And I think I would respond, well, dear Mr. Mexican president, you have quite a social problem in Mexico. A good part of your country you can't govern because it's controlled by illegal drug gangs and cartels. So maybe you're not the best person. You're not the wisest, most credible person to be lecturing Americans on how to solve social problems. And I know that you eschew coercive measures, but maybe you should use a little coercive measurement against the drug cartels. Maybe the Mexican army should actually get into line and go to war against these cartels that hold so many Mexicans hostage. More about the president's decision to impose these tariffs on Mexican imports when we return from this brief commercial break. You're listening to The Mark Scaringi Show.
Now back to The Mark Scaringi Show on News Radio WHP 580.
And welcome back to The Mark Scaringi Show, your place on the dial for constitutional conservatism. This is the place where we put America first. And our president has certainly done that with his recent announcement of just about 2 days ago of his decision to impose across-the-board uniform tariffs on the importation of every Mexican product, good, that comes into our country. The tariff will start at 5%, and then will increase by 5% every month until President Trump is satisfied that the Mexican government has made a substantial reduction in illegal immigration, drug smuggling, human trafficking across our border and into the United States. And I want to know what my listeners think. You're welcome to call in 717-540-0580 and let me know whether the president is making the right decision or the wrong decision. And let's hear from Diane from Harrisburg. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Yes, sir. Thank you for taking my call. I first want to remind and urge everyone to pray for President Trump tomorrow. My opinion is that President Trump has tried very diplomatic, soft tactics, trying to get Congress to deal with this, which they will not, trying to ask the president of Mexico and other places diplomatically to help him. They will not. And so it gets down to he runs out of choices that are the soft diplomatic choices. Now he's putting on the gloves, and he's saying, look, if it takes that you got to hurt in order to work with me, well, I guess it's going to have to hurt. So I remind anyone that this isn't what he started out with, but he's been forced, I believe, into this kind of, situation where you're going to have to hurt in order to help this. This is outrageous what we're dealing with.
Diane, I think you make a very good point, and that is the president has tried in so many different ways to get Congress to work with him, to build the wall, to change our ridiculous asylum and immigration laws, to stop this uncontrolled migration across our border. And they refuse to help him, and they're doing everything they can, as are the courts, to stop and stymie and prevent him from simply defending the border. So what other choices does he have?
Well, I think the businessmen that are Democrats, they should take a better look at what positions do they want to take with the Democrats, because down the road, which is now down the road, that it's going to affect their business policies and practices. If something had been done earlier that would have been within the United States policy, they might not be facing this.
Right. Good point. Diane from Harrisburg, thanks for calling. Appreciate you having the benefit of your views. I want to get to some other callers. We have Mike from Gettysburg. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Good afternoon, Mark. Let me first say that I'm formerly from New York, a Democrat. I don't always agree with what Trump does, but I do support him with the tariffs. I do support him with the borders. Now, I can't understand why all these countries want us for our money, and then when they don't get money, they don't want to know us anymore. And why can't we electrify the fences down there along the border? We got to do something. If these were people from outer space coming into our country like this, we'd be shooting rockets and everything else off at them. I know it's a humanitarian, but you claim asylum. You're supposed to claim asylum to the first country you come from. So Go ahead.
Well, that's exactly right. That's a very good point. And so many of these alleged asylees, which in a prior show and in a couple of my columns, I explained the law and how the overwhelming 99.9% of these Hondurans and Nicaraguans cannot claim asylum. There's no legal basis for it. Firstly. Secondly, they're coming through Mexico. That's where the claims should be.
That's correct. My parents, my grandfather and grandmother came out of Russia, and they came over in the early 1900s. They came through Ellis Island. They had to assimilate, learn the language, and make all the pledges to this country. These people come in and they don't care whether they simulate or not. You got people here 30 years, they don't speak a word of English yet.
Yeah, and that's a big difference in today's immigration policy from those of many, many decades ago when assimilation was at the forefront. Mike from Gettysburg, thanks for calling. Appreciate those comments and remarks. We're going to take a few more calls. We have Scott from Lebanon. You're on the Mark Scaringi Show.
Hey, Mark, good afternoon. Hey, I just wanted to comment here. I do agree. I think there's two separate issues going on. I agree with President Trump as far as with the tariffs on goods, as far as right now, because I believe too that we have a border crisis, and he has to do something. Your previous caller said, he tried to, handle it softly. I think he has to do this. One thing I will disagree with yourself and even Ken Matthews and some of the other talking heads on the right, the separate issue, we have a labor issue in the United States with blue-collar workers. And people would say years ago, Bob Durgan said this years ago, that as far as, the migrants are depressing our wages and everything else, that might have been the case 20 years ago. It isn't the case now. You can go down to 78 Carter. You can go to the 81 Carter. You can go to Lancaster County, Schuylkill County, Berks County. Places are hiring. I travel a lot for work. There is signs up all over for work, and the money, the starting wage, we're not talking about minimum wage jobs. We're talking about $18 an hour jobs that are blue-collar warehouse workers that they cannot have complement in their work details because there's not enough labor out there for $20 an hour jobs with benefits and everything else.
Yeah, I mean, you raise an excellent point. There's no question about that. And when I traveled all over Pennsylvania, when I was running for statewide office, I met with lots of business leaders, manufacturers. I still, through the various Chamber of Commerce events that I attend, and that's their number one complaint, is they can't find the skilled workers to work in their plants and factories. There's no question about that. I cannot disagree with you. I think you're exactly right. And I think the way forward on that issue is a large-scale change to our higher education policies coming out of Washington, D.C., where the federal government and the U.S. taxpayers are subsidizing so much and too much higher education, and there's so much peer pressure and so much pressure on young men and women coming out of high school that they must go to college, that if they don't go to college, they are somehow a second-class citizen or an inferior person, which is absolutely false. And so we have so many young people borrowing massive amounts of money to go to these schools where they learn little or nothing of substance or use for them in the real world. And that's what we have to address. And I think once we do that, we'll have a flush labor force with blue-collar workers to work in these manufacturing jobs.
And I agree. That is a very good point, Mark, as far as with what you're saying there. I think the pendulum has changed, and I actually think over the last number of years we have two separate issues. And again, it started really in the agriculture business. You're not going to get some average, let's say, white American being down in Adams County picking apples, and people got to realize those people that are working in the ag business are not minimum wage workers. They're making far more than what minimum wage is. These guys are, they get paid by the bushel. They don't get paid by the hour. They're making a very good living. So some of it is stigmatized as far as some of this labor, and as far as what we're asking immigrant labor to do. I don't see things changing in that market anytime soon. And I think we have two separate issues going on. We need border security. I'm 100% behind Donald Trump. But from the standpoint of the Chamber of Commerce, we do have a labor crisis in this country, and they do have to address that.
Scott, very excellent points, well thought out. Thank you for calling. Appreciate having the benefit of your views. Call back every Saturday and give us wise comments like that. Thank you very much. And Scott is bringing up issues that are, I think, of fundamental importance to the future of our economy and our country. No question about that. The issue remains today the president's decision to impose these tariffs across the board on the importation of Mexican products, goods that come over from Mexico. And the president, in his statement and in his tweet, is saying this is going to help an economic resurgence here in America as these factories and these manufacturing facilities come back to the U.S. But Scott from Lebanon raises the point, where are all the workers going to come from? There are just simply not enough Americans in the workforce, in manufacturing, and in labor. And that's a great point. But perhaps if these jobs, if more of these jobs come back and the wages are high enough, that will attract more and more workers who come out of our high schools. But I think there are larger issues here. We've got to work on the stigma, the negative stigma associated with labor and blue collar and agricultural jobs, which is totally false. So these are skilled workers. They're tough jobs. The people who work in those industries and those fields do a great service to Pennsylvania and to our country, and should be held in high regard, should be honored for their hard work, the way they once were many, many decades ago. But that's where we got to get back to in this country if we're going to once again be the manufacturing center of the world, which is so critically important for our economic and national security. Well, that's about all the time we have today for the Mark Scaringi Show. I want to thank you for listening. You can tune in every Saturday at 1 o'clock on WHP 580 and iHeartRadio to hear how we put America first. Thanks for listening.